name is Praise. It's such an awesome privilege for me to be with you once again. Now, you know how we do it on the show is a place where I try to answer several questions that is bothering your mind. Now, today, someone had sent me a message and she wants to know, Praise, I left my husband 5 years ago after several episodes with domestic violence, and even though my pastor was against it, I felt it was the right thing to do. Now, this was a man who was beating me every now and then, and I'd impregnated two other girls outside of marriage. Now, since I left him, my pastor has not allowed me to do any work in church, claiming that God can no longer use me in the department and I can no longer be a leader. The question I want to ask you is, does God hate divorcees? Okay, thank you very much for trusting me with this question. I get all kinds of questions, and you see, when people ask me a question, I wear the professional cap, and it's on that basis I'm going to respond to this question. Now, one of the ways I love to respond to issues like this is to tour the part of humanity. And the first question I would like to ask is, when people lie, right, when they tell a lie, do we strip them from leadership and say God cannot use them again? The answer is no. When people steal, do we strip them from leadership and say God cannot use them again? The answer is no. But when it comes to divorce and sexual immorality, we apply this law. Question I want to ask is, are there categories of sin, and are some sins more lethal than the other? Right? And is God more merciful to some sins than the other? After all, we preach that God is a merciful God. Now, you have left your marriage. As a family life therapist, all I do is to try to save a marriage, but first I save human beings. Because human beings make marriage. They need to exist for the marriage to exist. The moment one party is dead, then that marriage is null and void. So I will seek to save a life before any other thing, even though I will do my best to save a marriage. Now, your pastor, I do not know the doctrine in your church, by the way, and because I'm a man who loves to obey authority, I would also like to help you understand that your church may have what they call their own doctrines and rules and regulation and qualification for leadership. Now, it may not be scriptural, it may be organizational. So if I belong to an organization and the organization says a divorcee cannot be a leader, it might sound discriminatory, but that's what they've chosen to do. Now, because I'm a human being, I have a right to find another organization where my status is accepted and where I'm allowed to lead, even with my status. That's why the rule that governs voluntary organization under which a church falls is free entry, free exit. You walk in there with your legs, you were not tied, and it means you have the right to walk out when it no longer serves your best interest or when it now contradicts what you think is right. Now, if your husband had killed you 5 years ago, I don't know what position they would have taken, but I want to congratulate you that you were able to take a decision that promotes your best interest. Now, that's not my decision. That was your decision. And you have taken a decision that made you happy, because without that decision, maybe you would have been dead. And I congratulate you for that. Now, back to your question. Now that God can use you in leadership in your church, I need to say to you that you don't need to lead in your church for God to use you. Now, leadership is actually service. So, service doesn't have to be within a denomination, even though that is good. But if you go on your street and begin to feed the poor, that is leadership, which means you are solving hunger problem. If you organize people to clean your street, that is still God using you. This ideology that God can only use you within the four walls of a church or within a department is not totally correct, even though if you belong to a church, it's only appropriate for you to render your service and support the vision of the church, which, I'm a member of the church, I'm in the counseling unit, I have a leader over my head, and I submit to that leadership because what has been done there aligns with what I believe. Now, if you really want to lead, and your pastor is now saying that God cannot use you because of your divorce status, the simple counsel I'll give to you is find a place where that law doesn't exist, because that law may not be Bible. Like I said, it may be the doctrine of a church. And now you can rubbish the doctrine of an organization, because the church is an organization, for crying out loud. Now, so, well, let me take that back. A church organization is different from the church, because the church is the people, which is the called out one, the ecclesia, So now, so you need to ask yourself, what exactly do you want for your life? You want to serve God in a particular capacity? Please find an organization, or find a church organization that can take you the way you are. Because I always say to people, God is the God of the married, the single, the divorced, and the remarried. Right? That you have left your marriage doesn't invalidate your status as a child of God. It doesn't mean God cannot use you. I mean, there are so many people. Joyce Meyer, for example, I always love to talk about her. If she had stayed in her first marriage, she would have been killed, or she would have been a drug junkie, but she had to leave to start to get into another marriage. And God is using her all over the world. So if God can use Joyce Meyer, who says God cannot use you, so I don't understand this double standard that we try to inflict people with. I think what the church is trying to do is to say, hey, we do not want divorce, so that families don't disintegrate. And I told that part too. However, when divorces happen, to tell someone that God can no longer use a person, I don't think that's appropriate, because we are not God. Every man is man. God is God, and God can determine who he uses. God used a woman who has been married seven times in the Bible. So why can't God use the same person? I mean, someone else who has just lost a marriage due to no fault of hers. Because, I mean, you might want to say, oh, she should have stayed there, she should have prayed. This man was beating her, this man has impregnated two other women. You may say, but oftentimes I always say to people, I love the Bible, but sometimes you just need to wear the shoes of other people to know exactly how they feel. If you find yourself in that same position, what exactly would you do? How would you handle it? And this is one critical issue that we always love. I always love for people to do. Let's deploy empathy. Let's step into other people's model of the world. Let's go through what they go through. When we feel their pain, we might be able to resolve their issues and to know exactly what we'll do in that situation. So that God can use you, yes, God will use you. God doesn't hate divorcees. The Bible says in a place where it says I hate divorce, it doesn't necessarily mean that I hate divorcee. Those are two different things. It means that I want families to work together, but where they disintegrate, I will not hate the people. That's what it means. So I want you to know that God loves you, he cares about you, he still wants to use you, he's still going to use you, right? All you need to do is make yourself available, and please go and pray and ask God, Father, Lord, where do you want me to serve? And what do you want me to do with my life? God can use you to help singles. He can use you to help married. He can use you to help people like you who are divorced and they're going through the same pain. God can actually use you to reach the uttermost part of the heart. Is God all by himself? So let no man tell you that God cannot use you anymore. However, if you still want to stay in that church and they have a policy that says divorcees cannot occupy position, please obey the policy of your church, or else find another church. God can still use you elsewhere. Okay, I think I've answered your question. Thank you so much, guys, for joining me. This is Ask Praise, and I come here oftentimes to answer questions, complex questions. So if you want me to answer any question for you, please send a mail, praiseforwhere@gmail.com, or pf@iampraiseforwhere.com. Thank you so much for joining me today. I love you. Bye-bye.